Hi, friend.
Hi, friend.
And to the brave hearts listening out there, welcome to Permission to be Human. I'm Andrea.
And I'm Janelle.
Get ready for some real-time relationship woo and wisdom
from the front lines with occasional tantrums and tears
about how breaking rules, blurring boundaries, and tossing tradition can be catalysts for finding your truth.
Let's debunk the fairy tales we were told as children and create a new map for life.
Yes, Disney can go fuck itself.
If you're seeking permission to choose your own path,
freedom is the new F word, people,
and want to feel less alone along the way,
we got you.
Please note, this is our side of the story. Our partners and metamors have their own individual experiences, and we do not speak for them. Hi, Janelle.
Hey, Andrea.
Today we're talking about art. Yay. One of my favorite things ever.
Mine too.
I'll start with a little nod to spirit crowns. Sophie Howell, who makes these spirit crowns, which really just like never cease to amaze me. So I have a mini spirit crown. I call it a spirit crown, but it is definitely a lower version that I got at a clothing swap a decade ago, probably. It's like been in my costume bin for a long time. You know, it's like little roses with some gold chains on like a green wire. It's pretty flimsy, but it's lasted because it's just like, it can't be ruined very easily. So I used it on Mother's Day, like a couple of years ago, brought it for my mother-in-law to wear. And I just recently brought it to choir because I had this great idea where I'm just going to like at each choir practice, I'm just going to give someone the spirit crown, you know, for something they did or some solo they sang. Or recently, my friend Deborah, I was like having a really emotional night at choir. And I hardly have ever talked to Deborah. I mean, I've talked to her, but like very minimally. And just afterwards, she came up to me and she's like, it just seems like you need a hug. She just gave me this big hug and I like started falling in her arms.
I know Deborah with the long hair,
yes,
the gray hair.
Yeah, totally. So this time I'm awarding the spirit crown to Deborah. Thank you so much. And at each practice, she'll pass it on to someone new. Something you do.
I love that. That's reminding me of 3 to 5 Club with the cape.
Right. It's the same idea.
Yeah.
Yes. I think maybe subconsciously I was channeling that. Remember that cape? You introduced that cape, right? As a Burning Man thing. That was amazing.
Adding a little Burning Man flavor to business, straight business mastermind.
Yeah. And a nod to 3 to 5 Club. Because really that is where Janelle and I bonded, even though we're not part of that anymore.
Okay. Art.
Art to me is, I'm telling you, it's like the meaning of life because creation is the meaning of life.
Mic drop, everyone.
It's true. Making something. That is, to me, it's the most important thing. You can be creating anything. Knitting a sweater, making a baby, building a house, offering a massage. The origin of art has always given me hope because it's self-expression. And that is my highest mission, is to help people self-express. This is why I can go into a museum where I don't even like the artist and be perfectly happy. I applaud them for putting themselves out there, being vulnerable. Yeah, I just like constantly want to surround myself with different forms of arts.
Did you consider yourself an artist?
Absolutely. Yeah. Because I'm a writer. I do lots of different pieces of art. But first, we're going to take you down the road of how we've discovered art and what it means to us.
I love art too. It's a defining part of my existence. And I don't consider myself an artist.
But you are.
Well, I am. But I also do consider myself a patron of the arts. So there's also that piece too. So there's a couple of inspirations that have happened for me. I haven't for a few years, but for a long time, I was a recurring member of both the DAM, the Denver Art Museum, and the MCA, which is the Denver's Museum of Contemporary Art. And at the DAM, this is going back 15, maybe even 20 years, they used to have a contemporary art committee wing. Like, I'm not even sure what it was, but as a group, you could pay like an extra $50. You get invited to things that the contemporary wing was doing. And one of the things that they offered were these salons where you could go to people's homes in Denver who had incredible contemporary art collections. So as you can imagine, they also probably had incredible homes. But I got to see these collections inside a home instead of inside a museum.
Totally different.
Totally different. I loved this so much. It was one of my favorite things to do in Denver for years.
I would have loved that.
And it turns out, not only did I love it, but these visits had a huge impact on me because I look around my home and I now have a home filled with contemporary art that people come and visit to see and to take in and be inspired by, just like I was. And I was like, oh, yeah, it's like living amongst art. I didn't even know I had the dream for that until I had come into the reality of it.
Yeah, that's amazing. I'm like, why weren't we friends then?
We were living so close to each other.
I know. You were living with someone I knew. Like, so unfair. But like, I'm so glad that we came together. But that is amazing. And I think seeing art in someone's home also in a different context, especially not in a museum, it's just a whole different thing.
It makes it accessible in the way that even for all these fancy homes and fancy art, no one had a Picasso. Not to say that that's anything wrong with that, but it was a lot of money to spend on art, but it wasn't in these different homes. But it was a way that it was like, didn't have to be, right? Like I have a lot of art in my home that I bought when I was traveling that, cost
$20. Yeah, exactly.
So, but it showed that art could like elevate and lift and inspire. And it wasn't relegated to like, a special trip outside of the house.
Yeah, that's important. So it feels like an important part of art is something you first mentioned. So many of my quotes go back to you. And this one apparently was from Finland on letting go of form, which applies to seriously everything now, all the time. When I first went to the Clyfford Still Museum here in Denver, I loved the paintings because they had no title. They're all open to interpretation, right? And at first it bothered me because I love titling things. It's like one of my favorite things to do. But when things do have a title, then you default to that image or that frame or that idea or topic. And I love the idea that and I think it probably, my friend Amanda said this to me originally. She's like, my business is to do the art. What people think of it and how they interpret it is their business. Like it's totally different. It's on two different sides. And I think Clyfford Still obviously had the same idea. And not surprisingly, this somehow can relate back to the Waldorf School, which I know I've mentioned many times on this podcast, where they don't allow mostly kids at this point, like under 10, to have any kind of character or media on their lunchboxes, on their t-shirts, right? So no Dora, no SpongeBob.
Whoa.
Like, that is not allowed. You're supposed to have no advertising.
That's actually like no commodification is a Burning Man principle. Side note here, if you go to Burning Man and you're driving an RV that says Cruise America, you're supposed to we tape over Cruise America, even though everyone knows it's a Cruise America. But the idea is you're not promoting brands when you're at Burning Man.
Any brand of a car, you mean? Just like
anything.
Yeah, I did not know that either. So this was a huge drawing point for me because I was like, because they really say, please keep TV to a minimum. I mean, at the Shining Mountain Waldorf School in Boulder, you have to sign a contract saying you're not going to show your children any TV, which was too extreme for me. But in general, they're trying to cut down on that. And the idea is that as a kindergartner, my daughter made a doll. All the kids made their own little doll. They sewed them together and they had help and they called them their little ones. And none of them had faces. And that's true of all the wooden figures and all the puppets and all the shows at Waldorf too. And the idea is that when you put a face on a doll, then there's a limit on who they can be. But if there's no face, then it's all up to the children's imagination. And that's why there's no Dora, no character, or no Frozen, no Elsa, right? So there's no ceiling. So I've really been taught to let go of form. I mean, since the beginning of Waldorf, when I started sending my child there like 10 years ago. I mean, that just feels like it's very much a part of art is letting go of that form and just, it can be anything you want it to be. I think too, I wanted to talk about mundanity because I had this beer with my husband's friends, Brent, a very long time ago when we decided that creation was the meaning of life. And it was really weird because Brent and I had never gone out together, but like Boudreaux was like out of town. And like for some reason we were like pushed together to have a drink. We're like, hi. It was like a little bit awkward at first. And then we ended up having the best time. And he was like, he's like, you don't like the mundane. And I'm just like, no, I don't want something that's like been reproduced. But I had a really important aha moment then because I also realized later after I said, no, nothing mundane. I don't want a piece of art from Bed Bath & Beyond, for example. But then I at some point got over that because I was like, you know what? If something in Bed Bath & Beyond speaks to me and I love it and I want to look at it every day, why can't I put it in my living room? Often that's not what I'm attracted to, but sometimes the TJ Maxx thing is like, yep, love that. That's what I want in my living room. So I'm just trying to like release the judgment there.
So one thing that I want to talk about in terms of about art itself, and you were talking about how Clyfford Still intentionally didn't put titles on them, is that at the MCA, I took a class called Art Fitness by Adam Lerner. Hi, Adam, who former director of the MCA. And this is many, many years ago. And it was like a 3-part series where we actually went to the MCA for one of the days. And then we went to 2 other galleries. And he would walk us around And he would have us look at the art. It guide us on how to critically think about the art without saying, do we like this or do we not like this? It wasn't about whether we liked it or not. It was, how did we feel? What did we notice? What could we take in? Did you notice the size of the painting? What is the size? If it was it very small? Was it a painting that was like, the size of your hand, or was it something that was like bigger than you were? If it was a painting or it was a sculpture. But what did size mean? What do the colors mean? What are the textures? What do they mean to me? Not as they mean in my mind. How do they make me feel? What did that evoke in me? He was teaching us how to look at the art through different questions that when we got to the underlying meaning, like something new totally revealed itself. It wasn't about, did I like it or not like it? That actually was like the least interesting question we could ask.
Oh, I like that part. The least interesting thing you can ask is if you like it or don't like it. Because it just shuts down.
Just shuts down. Yeah. Then you you move on instead of like standing really close to it, standing far back from it, like seeing it in context to the room that it's in. What was the era? What were the materials? Really looking at the piece of art through a critical eye and walking away and being able to describe the art, not saying I liked it or didn't like it.
And I think this is a great way to look at life, all things in life. There's a quote by Natalie Goldberg in one of like my Bibles of life, The Long Quiet Highway, where she really said she got to a point when she was learning about Buddhism where she was like, wow, can we just not judge something? Like, can we just hold it up, turn it around, put it on its side, put it on our head, just examine it and not make a judgment right away. And that just opens your mind to so many more possibilities. So, and I think I see you doing that in life, Janelle. You inspire me to do it too. And it's a challenge because the world wants us to judge. It's definitely inspiring us and like pushing us to do that. But I really see you just do that very infrequently. Judge or like make an immediate opinion on something. You're just like, well, I felt this way. Or you're pointing out something about how you felt or the experience rather than, nope, not for me.
And I will also say, learned skill.
Takes time.
Takes time. When I first met my ex-husband, he was like, is there something else besides good, happy, like, and dislike? That was the
general idea.
The general idea. Again, for many reasons, he was the first to teach me something in many ways of like, no, think differently. It doesn't matter. Like, he's like, I don't care if you like it or dislike it. What else is there? Dig deeper, the other thing. So, and
Yeah,
I'm
beautiful.
pointing that out because I appreciate and receive your compliment. And I wasn't born that way.
Yeah, it was a learned skill. Got it. So how did your relationship with art begin? Like with pieces of art?
So my relationship with art began, that I can like concretely remember, is I was at an ARTMA event. And it stands for Art for Morgan Adams. It's a nonprofit art auction to raise money for children's cancer research. And the founder was a friend and a photographer, and his best friend was a friend and an artist. I knew the family and I was supporting them. And yet the impact on me was huge. I was 25 when I first went, and I got totally sucked in to the auctioneer. Have you ever been in the presence of an auctioneer?
Once or twice.
Listening to them talk, I was just like,
And you're mesmerized?
yeah. And I was just like, I just like started raising my hand and I was like, yes, yes. And in the end, that first ARTMA, I ended up winning my first
Buying.
Yeah. My first piece of art because mine was the last hand raised for this particular piece of art that I was bidding on. And it was $500. And I was like, okay. And I woke up in the middle of the night later on and I was like, what did I just do? Like that was so much money. And yet I still have that piece and I have continued to buy original art ever since then. And in fact, that piece of art was a mixed media tree of life. And it is currently in the living room of the Goddess Temple right now. And that was my first relationship with it. And then it ended up becoming buying art on my trips and travels became like part of the experience of my trips.
Yeah, that really resonates with me too. What I want to note there that I heard is just like, you're like, wait, I'm going to spend $500 on this thing that's going to hang on the wall. And like, usually you spent $500 on something else, right?
Right. Even then, to be honest, $500 was a lot. At the time, like that was also if it had been $100, I would have been like, okay.
Yeah.
But I had gone above my normal budget on many levels.
Yeah. And so I think that is, it's just interesting how we have just perceptions about how much things should cost. So for me, you know, when I was backpacking with my friend Nicole from Long Island across Europe, I bought a lot of prints and paintings, like stuff that I could just roll up and put in my backpack, and it was cheap. First, I just bought a print. It was Ophelia in the Water from Shakespeare. And that was probably like the first thing that I was like, oh, that looks like a piece of art. It was just a print, but it was something that was more artsy. I still have that up in my house today. Like it's so representative for me. And then got this piece in Greece, just at a random street market in black and white. I still have that today. I adore it. And then I found this artist, Christine Peliquin, in my 20s. I found her in Florida when I was visiting my parents. And then I went on her website and I was like, $600. There's no way I can do that. And I didn't buy it. And I always wished that I would have, but I couldn't do it. Like you were like, and you did it you did it. And yeah. And so I think there was like this thing. I was like, oh, afraid to love that or afraid to spend money on it. Like it was the wrong thing to spend money on. So I had to kind of get over that hump.
Right. There's a value. Like somehow, like, I don't know where your parents were with it, but like, oh, like that is not the thing you're supposed to spend money on.
Pretty much. I think there was something in me. And so I didn't for a long time. But I think that eventually that helped me get over this thing where I was like, oh, art gives me permission to love what I love.
You said permission.
I said permission. And I think it is this like combination of elements that helps me understand the freedom of what could be put together to build something completely different. Whereas before I was like, oh no, things are in buckets, they're in categories. This goes with this and this goes with this, and you can't mix them up. There's some kind of structure and order I liked to that, but I've always been attracted to mixed media, like newspaper and fabric and typewritten pages and coins and feathers, and like seeing how this is just kind of a reflection of my whole life, like mixing the mundane with the magic and the trivial with the tragic. And this, in a sense, helped me let go of form. Do you like mixed media too?
I learned on this episode, like listening to you, that I love mixed media, collages, different textures.
Yes, collages, like newspaper, like old things. That's always what attracts me. And because there's texture.
It's the texture that I think I'm really drawn to.
Yeah, I love that too. And I think it's also just like such an imitation of life, because mixing stuff up. No, it's Anne LaMott. She talks about just the finest and truest thing is that all truth, all life is a paradox. It's filled simultaneously with heartbreaking sweetness and beauty, desperate poverty, floods and babies and acne and Mozart, all swirled together. I think that's really, how I believe art is an imitation of life, because that is what life is at any given moment. It's everything swirled together. And you think that's not how it works, because Hollywood shows it a particular way.
Except in the movie. Everything, everywhere, all at once.
Ooh, good one. Good reference. Did you love that movie?
I really liked it. And I told you to watch it. And then you're like, oh no, not for me. I would want to watch it again. But yeah.
Yeah, I watched it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
You didn't love it.
No. Okay. So living amongst art. Janelle, tell me about your home, where we're at right now.
Which I also call the Goddess Temple. So what I live in is I live in one half of a large duplex. Memphis lives on the other side. We bought this place as a fix and flip project back in 2021. And at the time, it was considered one structure. It was zoned commercially, and it was an architect's office. All the floors were connected. And we bought it to convert into 2 residential places. And the plan was to sell it. And then the plan was to move into one side. And then the plan ended up being that we got divorced and I moved into the other side. But it was a major project. And I'm someone that I would say, if you give me a blank canvas, I'm like, that is so overwhelming.
Scary.
Yeah. So much. But if you give me like a canvas with like paint these 3 colors and these 3 lines, I can be like, oh, this line should be thicker. I want this color over here. Like I can like work with that. So I remember walking through this house when it was under construction, like they just bought it. And I was like, oh my God, I was so overwhelmed. There's so many walls to put up because they brought it down to the studs. There had to be like floors that needed to be poured with concrete. It was such a blank slate. And I could not see the vision. It's 100+ year old house. And there was just so much. But Memphis and Boombox, who are the GCs on the project, and Boombox Design is absolutely incredible. She's just like a walking piece of art, and they just saw inspiration and possibilities in every room. So the house itself became the art project. Boombox and her team recycled the wood from within these 100-year-old house and converted it into art. There's like a mural above the fireplace on Memphis' side. All it is the studs of wood from the house, right? And it looks super beautiful. She removed plaster from beams and kept them exposed because the wood itself was so beautiful. The fireplace was custom designed by friends of ours. There are murals, and there's lots and lots of LEDs and laser cut panels and custom barn doors that are designed by local artists. Like when I moved into it, it was already a piece of art. Like I wasn't a decision maker in any of that, what I just described, right? Like that was what was like, we were going to sell the house, and these were all the things that the house was coming with. So I already got to move into a house that already had the bones of art. And then I got to fill it with art from around the world that I had bought. In my living room, which takes up an entire wall, is a triptych. It's a big door that's over 11 feet tall and 7 feet wide. And there's 2 windows on either side of it, and they're teal, and they're like several hundred years old. Memphis and I bought these in Indonesia. Big art was inspired by Memphis. I had always bought things on my travels that I could pack in a suitcase or in my backpack. And he brought customs brokers into my world, where big pieces took months to ship across the world. But they're also incredibly defining of a space. These Indonesian doors, and we'll put a picture on Instagram if anyone wants to see them. Yeah, they impact the energy of the house. They transport me into another time, into another country. They're so big, they're so immersive, like I could be swallowed up by them, but they also provide so much color and vibrancy that the feeling of them in this, like the story of me finding them and then bringing them here is its own piece of like, wow, I really did that. And then the other piece is that there's a feeling of like, they're the things that when everyone walks in, they're like, whoa. They set the inspiration and impact of the energy of the entire house. Because everyone's like, where did you get these? How did you get these? We had to cut holes in the ceiling to put them in because they're taller than the ceiling. Yeah. What they evoke in all of us is a feeling of travel because they're clearly not from this country.
I remember seeing them for the first time in your old house.
And then I also love supporting local artists and art. And they make the world a more interesting place and a beautiful place. And so the impact for me in living in a house full of art by local artists is that I feel like I'm living within creative energy that is inspiring to me. It's inspiring to others when they move in. And, you know, there's a lot of beige and white houses out there. And walking into my house, people are reminded that they can be big, fully expressed with color, with whatever they want. It doesn't have to look like everything else. And it doesn't have to look like what's on the TV shows.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever heard you describe it that way. People can feel free to express in all their color, in all their shine, all their sparkle.
Yeah, I mean, I used to be really afraid of putting like nail holes in the wall because I was like, oh gosh. And now it's like, oh no, like that can be, someone can fix that.
Do you want to tell me about the mural that I just saw this morning?
Oh my gosh. There is a piece of art that is live and in the making. So in our backyard, we have 2-car garage, and Memphis does, and it's connected. It's one huge 4-car garage. It's in the back of this duplex. And so it's a massive wall frames the backyard.
That can be seen from inside the house very easily.
Right. Every window on the back of the house, you're looking out on this wall. And Memphis and I hired a muralist, Bobbi MacGee Lopez, to create a mural that represents the energies of each side of the duplex that he and I are embodying or bringing in. And this is something that Memphis and I do really well together. This is the second mural that we've created. Like it's our art that in our vision that an artist has translated. It's so cool. It's going to take Bobby about 3 weeks. He's like a week in to painting it. And it's like so much color. And there is like my side is representing the feminine and this like bringing spirit into form. And there's organic. There's lots of flowers and it's greens and it's golds and it's teals and it's tied into the colors of the doors that I just spoke about. Yeah. So when you're sitting in the living room and the teal couch, you see the teal doors and then you can look out and you see this teal garden on the wall. It is really exciting. And the feeling that I have now that there's some color on it is that when I'm sitting inside my house and I'm looking out, is that he has brought the outside inside. This mural is really changing how I feel inside the house.
That's beautiful. And you've essentially created a room in the back of the house.
Yeah.
You've extended the house.
Yes. And then in every window then is a frame for a piece of art.
Even right now, I can see it. I can see it out the window.
That is framing that piece of the mural.
Yeah. Wow. I just want like brave hearts to know like this is possible too. There are expensive muralists and there are less expensive muralists. And you actually can paint something on your wall. It doesn't have to be like professional either.
You don't have to hire someone. You could do it yourself. I actually saw someone on Instagram just like with their kids were home and sick and they just did it themselves.
So, yeah. And this is perfect. Like this brings me to the art, living amongst art in my house. Because about, I don't know, 10 years ago, we just decided to start painting and drawing on a mural on a wall in our house, like in the living room. I mean, we just started doing it. And at first there was no theme. My daughter would draw on it and then I would do something and then Boudreaux would start painting. And then there was kind of a theme. Then we created this big swirl. And it was just so amazing for people to come in and be like, whoa, what are you doing on the wall? Like, I'm just like, no, it's just an open palette. Like you can draw something. Here's some paints.
Open canvas. Like talk about permission.
Oh my God. Right? I kind of forgot about that. Like, I don't even think about it now because it doesn't look like that anymore. I mean, we painted over it and the piano is there now. But yeah, it's the ultimate permission that is so off limits typically for a child. And then my daughter wanted to paint half of the wall in her bedroom. And I'm like, why not? So she just painted a bunch of flowers in there and let herself get all dirty. And it was amazing. So in my house, it's a much smaller scale, which totally makes sense. Janelle and Memphis are both like incredibly tall people. Memphis is like a big guy. Boudreaux and myself and my daughter are hobbity at best. We really are. Our house is tiny and we're kind of small people. I remember when someone super tall came in the house, it's like, they like duck in the doorways. Yeah, but in a similar way, I have a lot of pieces in my house that kind of feels like my shrine or my altar. I have a lot of just little touches here and there, right? So I have my birthing chair that I bought that someone carved that's 100 years old. And I birthed my daughter in a birthing chair. I got it at a thrift shop in Athmar Park. I have these pussy willow branches that I found at the Friday store. If anybody knows what that is. Do you know what the Friday store is?
No, I was thinking in the Tuesday store. I don't know.
Tuesday morning? No, yeah. Whatever. The Friday store is like this discount store that is in Arvada that's no longer exists because it left during COVID. It's like a convenience store with cheap organic food in it. It's like the size of this bedroom. And they just had these beautiful twisted pussy willow branches leaning against the wall. And I'm like, hey, are those for sale? And they're like, yeah, I guess so. How about $5? So I use this as my curtain rods. And then I have doorknobs on the wall that my mom created for me, which I've probably talked about before. These are something you'd probably think you could find like in Marshalls or TJ Maxx because they look like a perfectly upcycled piece. And my mom made them out of, my grandma's house doorknob, our farm doorknob, our old shed doorknob. And so she put it together with so much meaning. And then I have an entire wall Mod Podged with book pages that took me like 4 years to make. And I just slowly chipped away at it.
The reason why it took so long is because you were intentional about the pages.
Yeah. I didn't just pull some out. I was intentional about the pages. There's Little House on the Prairie. There's Island of Blue Dolphins, Alice in Wonderland, Little Women, some Shakespeare. And toward the end, I got a little bit more careless. But and then there's a poetry book from college. And so one whole wall is just all book pages. Let's see what else. I mean, I have a lot of little pieces from different countries. Stuff from Africa. I have a switch plate that's covered with stamps from the Middle East, postage stamps. And then one of my favorite things that I even forget about now is the chandelier that hangs above in my kitchen. Chandelier. Yeah, it is my favorite thing ever. When I saw this for the first time, I felt like, oh, I've been preparing for this my entire life. My entire life, I've been collecting shells and rings and rocks and sticks and beads and bits of newspaper and jewels that I would just kind of put away and be like, oh, I want to keep that, but I don't know what to do with it. And then I found this amazing artist, Tracey Barnes, who puts all of this stuff into a chandelier at my friend Gwen Pilar's house. So she put this all together. It has all these, like the first ring I ever had, my grandma's jewelry, something my husband gave me on our wedding day, little newspaper like cutouts stuck onto a piece. I mean, turquoise. And so her husband's an electrician. He puts it all together. He adds the lights. And then she got this piece of wood from Creede, Colorado, which happens to be the hometown of one of my favorite authors, Pam Houston. And she put it together. And it's just like, I love it so much. Like it has so much meaning.
Yeah. It has so much meaning and it is so beautiful. Like I don't know the meaning of any of the objects on there. And this chandelier, which is over your kitchen island, there's like an effervescence, there's a lightness, there's a fairy quality to it, like the different beads. It's not a shimmering, but there's just something, it just, like I'm just so drawn to it. And then on top of that, it's made of everything that's meaningful. Right. It's just unbelievable.
Yeah. There's like an exhale maybe for it or something. Just like there's a breathability that I like about it. So finally, then there is a photograph that is in my house that I walked into this yoga studio into kindness 10 years ago and was like, no, that's my photo. Like that's supposed to be mine. I need that. And I remember asking them about it and like, can I buy that? So a woman running with like a bunch of like maybe a sari on, a lot of folds, and she's running through a field and just some flowers. And this has been like my meditation go-to image a lot of my life. I saw it first in the Basketball Diaries when Leonardo DiCaprio is shooting up heroin basically, and he's like super high. And he's running through this field of flowers. And I just love that image so much. And I just like lodged it in my head. I'm like, that is like my dream sequence image. I always go back to it. And I was like, that's it. That's me. That's me. I'm running through the field of flowers. And, you know, a few years later, I'm just like, oh yeah, I bought it. So sometimes it's just like a strickening of like, oh, this was for me. Like this was made for me to look at every day. And seeing that familiarity and seeing the imitation, like the mirror reflected back to myself, it's like, it's a reminder of my journey. It's a reminder of the motion, of moving, and of being outside. So much meaning and emotion.
As we're continuing here, Brave Hearts, I'm just curious, like, as you think about your own house, right, we're kind of broadening the traditional definition of art. I've mentioned like doors hanging in the wall in my dining room. You've mentioned a light switch that has like stamps on it and doorknobs that are made, you know, that are meaningful from your mom. It's like there's such a broad range of what art is and why we want supporting it or surrounded by it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Both of us have mentioned that we bought a lot of art while we're traveling, but I also want to talk about art as the destination. Right? I have traveled to go see art. And a couple of exhibits I just want to highlight. James Turrel is a light artist, and he had 3 exhibits simultaneously around the country in LA, New York at the Guggenheim, and in Houston one year. And I traveled to LA and to New York specifically to see his exhibits. One thing in particular is he has something called Sky Spaces, where he essentially puts a hole in the ceiling of someplace and then like puts light around that and then just is lighting the sky and the clouds and the stars and the sun are the actual like art. And then the light that he's put into the ceiling is impacting the shade of the sky.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, there's something about it because it's immersive. Like you often are lying down to take in the sky spaces. As a light artist, he's also created art where he is trying to emulate the ethereal shades of ombre of the sunsets, of the sunrises that you're like, well, these colors are so evocative and like are drawing you in. You think only exist in nature. And then he has spent a lifetime creating them inside like a room. And it's so beautiful. Like I can feel my like self like leaning in as I'm describing it when I think about his art, which is just again light. And there's times where I've seen a sunset and instead of thinking, oh, James Turrel is so great at making something that looks like the colors of the sunset, there's times that I'm like looking at the sunset, I'm like, wow, you're doing such a good job like creating like a James Turrel. Just something about his work that's very compelling. I'm not giving any slight to sunsets on their own. 2 other things is I traveled to New York to see The Gates by Christo when he had this exhibit, immersive exhibit through Central Park. And then my other one I want to call is Meow Wolf in Santa Fe. There's also a Meow Wolf there in Denver. So the theme that I would say is that I really love immersive art experiences where I'm somehow being invited to interact with the art in some way.
Yeah, me too, for sure. And Meow Wolf was amazing in Santa Fe. That was the most immersive thing I've ever experienced. I had a couple of really immersive art experiences. One was at the Mark Rothko Chapel in Houston. Really just very meditative, just sitting with the art. And it's hard to describe, but it was incredibly just the stillness and the presence of sitting in that chapel and drinking in the simple art while meditating was unlike anything I've experienced before. I felt almost outside of myself. It was really quite sacred, I would say. And I was alone. It was a lone trip, so I wasn't with anyone else. There was no pressure to leave. So I just felt really like I could completely settle into the experience. I've loved Mark Rothko my entire life. I used to have his posters in college.
I actually have posters of him and have books of him in my car.
And then I had this crazy experience at the Museum of Contemporary Art like 20 years ago. My husband and I were, in fact, under an influence. Like we were both high at the time, which was totally weird. We never went anywhere high then. Like I didn't even hardly ever smoked then. And of course it wasn't legal then. Maybe we've been dating a year or something. Walked into the MCA and there was an exhibit called, I don't know how to pronounce this. It was called like Archipelago.
Archipelago.
I always say it wrong.
Okay.
Archipelago.
Okay.
Right, which kind of means an island. Yeah, a group of islands. So no one else was there. Just interesting because it was just kind of empty. And we wandered through, and what actually happened was that we realized the MCA was, in fact, kind of playing with us because the whole idea of the whole exhibit, we later confirmed, was about boundaries. And there was confusion on where to go, like where the guests were supposed to go and where the people who worked there were supposed to go. And I think it was on purpose that it was fuzzy. And so we wandered in a couple different places and then someone would politely tell us, actually, you're not supposed to be here. And we're like, wait, but the arrows pointed us in here. And you could tell everyone was in on the joke. Like the whole thing was an immersive art experience. And so we kept thinking, are we supposed to be here? Do we belong or do we not belong? It was really just constantly about this, like crossing of boundaries, staying in your space, going into someone else's space. It was one of the most exciting things that ever happened to us. We just felt like it was completely for us. Like nobody else was there. Clearly, they're just like, oh, we're going to have lots of fun with this.
Adam, are you listening? Is this one of your exhibits? It totally feels like one of yours.
It was a day we will never forget, for sure. And that's when I was like, oh, like art does not have to be on a wall. This was something we experienced in our entire bodies. And granted, we were like a little out of our element. And so I think that just enhanced the entire thing.
Right.
So yeah, the moral of the story is art gives you freedom to do whatever you want. And self-expression is the tool to like helping yourself feel more free.
And it's not about whether you like it or whether you don't like it. It's how does it make you feel?
Go buy some art. Go make some art. Brave hearts.
Thanks for listening.
We love you.
Do you need permission to be human? You got it.
Listen, subscribe, and review on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Learn more about us at permissiontobehuman.live.